Jalen Brunson is the X factor for the New York Knicks. Jalen did a phenomenal job to slowly improve his game each and every season until he eventually got to the point where he's at today, and that led him to get that huge contract that he got with the New York Knicks. But now it's time for Jalen to perform in a bigger role with the Knicks. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy Sports, I make opinionative NBA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. I also want to quickly mention that I recently started up an MMA channel, and if you guys are interested in that, the link will be in the description. But anyways, let's get into it. Jalen Brunson was drafted with the number 33 overall selection in the 2018 NBA draft by the Dallas Mavericks. And when Jalen was originally drafted, he was seen as a decently talented player that could potentially turn into a decent bench scorer in the future, or maybe even a low-level starter. But obviously at the time, nobody expected Jalen to get anywhere near the level of player that he's at today. Now obviously, I'm not saying that Jalen's a superstar type player or even an all-star type guy at this point, although I do think he's decently close to being an all-star, but the point that I'm trying to make is Jalen has made great strides throughout his career thus far. So Jalen wasn't one of those guys that had all the talent in the world right away and was dominating in the NBA right away. He was one of those guys that had to work his way up and continuously work extremely hard in his game and continuously improve certain aspects of his game to get to the point where he's at today. And in my opinion, I like that style of player better as opposed to a player that has all the talent in the world and didn't necessarily need to work as hard right out of the gate, because I think there's more longevity in the player that works extremely hard on their game season after season. And of course, still at this point, Jalen is still young, and I would definitely expect him to continue on that trajectory and continue to improve his game year after year. And I think the organization switch to New York is going to be something that's great for Jalen's individual career going forward, and that extra opportunity that he's going to get in New York is really going to give him the capability to take his game to the next level. Because obviously there's some benefits in Dallas to play next to a guy in Luka Doncic. You can learn a ton of things from a player like that. Also, he's going to take a ton of pressure off you. But at the end of the day, if you're a player that's trying to take that next step, it is going to be difficult in doing so playing next to a guy in Luka who's one of the more ball dominant players in the NBA, maybe the most ball dominant. So therefore, I think Jalen could definitely be the X factor for the Knicks. But before we go into why I think so, let's quickly break Jalen's game point by point to really describe why I think he's such a good player. So starting with Jalen's three-point shooting ability, this is definitely a really good ability of his game, as he does have a nice ability to pull up from that three-point range, cross over, sidestep, and step back. Basically from that range, he has all the abilities you could ever need. But on top of that, he also shoots a pretty good 37% from deep. But moving on to Jalen's mid-range shooting ability, this is probably the best ability of his game, as Jalen has all the abilities that he does from that three-point range, of course, but he also somewhat has a post turnaround fadeaway within his game, which is pretty unique based upon the size and position that he does play, but he definitely does do it at a decently efficient rate. But even besides that, from that mid-range, he's just a very efficient player. But now talking about his driving and finishing ability, this is also something that Jalen does at a very high level, and it's especially impressive considering the size that he is and the fact that he isn't necessarily the most athletic guy either. But once driving all the way to the basket, Jalen has a nice ability to put up floaters through contact. He also has a great ability to finish through contact in general with crafty layups, either his left or right hand. And overall, I would just say Jalen has a knack to drive all the way to the basket and finish around players. But the great thing about Jalen is not only is he a really good scorer in the NBA and is also continuously improving, as I mentioned, but he also has a pretty nice ability to pass and play make. Now obviously in Dallas, it wasn't that big of an issue, and Jalen didn't necessarily need to show off his passing and playmaking abilities all that much because Luka was there obviously and he was taking care of most of that. But in New York, Jalen is definitely going to have a bigger opportunity to pass and play make, and in my opinion, it's definitely going to show off his ability that he already has, because I definitely do see him as a pretty good passer and playmaker at this point. Now this previous year, Jalen averaged around 5 assists per game, which is definitely decent, I would say, considering the circumstances. But this season for the Knicks, I could easily see him average anywhere from 7+ assists. Now on the defensive side of the court, this is definitely somewhere where Jalen does struggle, but one thing that I will say is he does have pretty active hands that definitely helps him out, but overall obviously he's not that good of a defender. But now let's move on to the question of the video, which is why I think Jalen Brunson is going to be the X factor for the Knicks. So I think this for a couple different reasons, but starting with the first is due to the unknown of Jalen. So obviously, as I mentioned before in the video, I think Jalen is a very good player at this point, and he definitely played high level basketball for the Mavericks, especially in this previous year's playoffs. But there is somewhat of an unknown factor for Jalen coming to New York, because you don't necessarily know how he's going to perform. There's a chance that he could be better in New York than he was in Dallas, which is something that I feel is the most likely. There's also a chance he could be the same as he was in Dallas, and there's also a chance that he could be worse in New York than he was in Dallas. Whenever you have a player go into a new organization and a different situation, there's always a certain level of unknown, but I think there's even more of an unknown in this case just due to the fact that he was playing alongside a guy in Luka who's very ball dominant, as I mentioned before. So it would be interesting to see how Jalen handles that bigger opportunity in New York. Now the next reason why I think Jalen could be an X factor for the Knicks is solely based on the position that he does play, because it's been pretty obvious for a very long time now, especially to Knicks fans, that one position that the Knicks were never able to get down pat was that point guard position. So bringing in a guy like Jalen was very exciting to a lot of Knicks fans because it maybe could finally solve that point guard issue that the Knicks have had for so long. Now I mentioned this in a lot of my videos, but it's extremely important to have high level point guard play on your roster because A, it just makes everybody else's lives on the court easier, as that point guard could set up players and just get them easy shots, but also it would be extremely important in late game situations because a true high level point guard would be able to run an NBA offense in the clutch where maybe different players that play different positions would somewhat struggle in the clutch. And especially talking about a guy like Julius Randle, he's been known to struggle tremendously in clutch situations. So bringing in a guy like Jalen that has been pretty clutch throughout his career would definitely help out the Knicks, but would also especially help out a guy in Julius Randle, assuming that he is still going to be on the Knicks roster next year. Now there's going to be a couple different factors that determine the success or lack thereof success for the Knicks next year, but I really do think the play of Jalen Brunson is going to play a huge role in that. If Jalen continues on his trajectory and continues to play extremely well, I think the Knicks are going to be somewhat successful next season, and I definitely do see them as a playoff team. But if Jalen regresses next season and doesn't play all that well, I probably would say the Knicks are not going to be all that successful next season. Now obviously I am biased as I am a Knicks fan, but if I had to guess at this point, I would probably say I think Jalen will be successful overall with the Knicks. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Jalen is going to be an X factor for the Knicks, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy it, check one of these two videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.